So now we come into the hardware side of things. Now, before I go into what specific hardware is required, I think it's worthwhile going through an example home network diagram just to give you an understanding of how this will sit into your home. So here on the left, we have a router, and typically this is it is assigned an internal IP address, and they look typically like 192.168.1.1. I've also seen it as 192.168.0.1. I've also seen it as 10.0.0.1. It just really depends on what router model you have. But basically, the job of the router is to then connect up and route packets throughout all of your existing devices as soon as you connect it to the router. So typically what will happen is you'll have 5 ports in the back. One port will be labeled WAN, which is wide area network, and then you'll get 4 ports for your LAN ports, and that stands for local area network. And typically what happens is you will plug your devices in, or sometimes it will also broadcast a Wi-Fi signal, and you can then connect a laptop or your mobile or your tablet through to this router via Wi-Fi. Now, what will also happen is every time a new device is introduced onto your network, it will also be assigned an IP address, an internal IP address, by the router. And so it will look like 192.168.1.1 for the laptop, 192.168.1.9.10, so on and so forth for the devices. And also, when you wire them in to the back, it will also have like 192.168.1.5 for the printer, for example, and then you'll also have an existing PC potentially, and that might also be assigned an IP address of 192.168.1.6. And so what we will be doing is adding in the Nodebox directly to and plugging it in to the router. And the Nodebox in this example has been assigned 192.168.1.11. So what will happen is we will use our existing laptop or our existing PC, and we will remotely connect into this Nodebox. So this Nodebox, generally speaking, will not have a monitor, keyboard, or mouse attached to it. It'll just be the computer itself, and it'll be on, and it will be connected via Ethernet cable. Now, the way that we're going to control this is using our existing laptop or our PC. And what will happen is we will, what's known as SSH, into the Nodebox. It doesn't matter whether or not this PC or your laptop is running Windows, Mac, or Linux. It will, you'll be able to use a program called the terminal, or if you're in Windows, it will use the PowerShell application to then remote into this, and I'll show you how to do that later on in the series. But at this point, it's important to remember that we don't want anything blocking communications between your PC and your Nodebox, or your laptop and your Nodebox via the router. And typically, if you install things like VPNs or firewalls or those sorts of things, that may interrupt communications and the free-flowing information between the PC, the router, and the Nodebox. So just keep that in mind. Disable any VPNs. Have a look at some of those firewall settings to make sure that you can access different devices from your laptop or your PC, which you'll be working at throughout the series. Now, the other thing is, when I do this, what will happen is I will be plugging it into my router, and I'll be sitting at this workstation here, and I will be controlling this throughout the series. Now, let's talk a little bit about the hardware itself. Now, what I typically like to use is the Dell Optiplex ultra small form factor, as I mentioned earlier, and that's what this represents here. It's a small form factor PC. I'll show you what it looks like a little bit later. And I typically get that refurbished. It's not brand new or anything. An older generation, as I explained, will need an i5 processor, 8 gigs of RAM will typically do, and for the purposes of running a Nodebox and installing Ubuntu on it. We're also going to need a brand new 2 terabyte SSD. I would recommend getting a brand new one. And you can either use a 2.5-inch SATA, which is just a small little, rectangle, or you can use an M2 drive if the motherboard of your Optiplex or your computer supports it. You'll need the capacity you want is 2 terabytes. The M2 drives are slightly smaller. They come in like almost like a chewing gum stick. And these ones are, rectangular in size and quite larger. I'll show you what each of them look like. But the safer, more cheaper option is to use the 2.5-inch SATA drives. So we'll get that on various marketplaces, and I'll show you where I typically source these things from as well. The next thing you'll need is an Ethernet cable. The length is as required. And depending on where you want to keep it, you can sometimes just keep it next to your router if you want it. The other thing that I would mention is if you are keeping this in a place, make sure it's in a dry place. It's not accessible to children or pets, and it's well ventilated so that you keep it in a place where it's not going to get fumbled with, or someone's going to disconnect the Ethernet cable or something like that. So you just want to keep that either close by to the router or in some cupboard with some ventilation, or tucked away somewhere. It's very small, as I said, but yeah, just keep in mind. So what I'm going to be doing is plugging in a cable into my router and the other end into the Nodebox, and it'll be kept like that for the duration of the series. Now, during the initial setup, when we install Ubuntu 24.04, we will be hooking up a keyboard and mouse, a monitor, and we'll also need at least a 4 gigabyte USB drive. And these are just for initial setup. Once that is complete and the operating system has been installed, we can disconnect all of those devices, and it'll just look like the Nodebox with the Ethernet cable and the power supply, obviously. So that's how it's going to stay, and then we're going to control it using our existing Mac, Windows, or Linux PC or laptop. It doesn't really matter, but yeah, that's how we're going to be controlling it throughout the rest of the series. And so when you see me on the videos demonstrating things, I'm sitting at my PC and I'll be calling out to my Nodebox, or I'll be SSHing into the Nodebox. Okay. So those are some of the items that you'll need. Now, where I would typically source this information or these products, eBay is a good one. Dell Optiplex USFF. Hit enter on that one. Let's see what comes up. So this is a bit of an older model, 4th generation i7. I think that's probably it's fairly cheap, $150. Pre-owned 9020. They're a bit older. It can do the job, but it's going to take a little bit more time. Obviously, the more you spend, the better generation of PCs. Of CPU that you're going to get. But typically something like, for example, the 7060 with an i5 8th generation CPU with 8 gigs of RAM. This is a perfect deal for it. This one as well, 7060 i5 8th generation, and yeah, with $19 postage. So that'll come in at about, whatever, $240 or $250 or whatever it is. And it just depends on what you prefer. These Optiplexes is, again, you can use other marketplaces. There's Facebook Marketplace, there's eBay, there's Gumtree here in Australia. But in the US, you could go for all of those plus Craigslist or whatever else, but generally speaking, you'll want something with a decent CPU, i5, i7, with at least 8 gigabytes of RAM. Depends how much you want to spend as well. It's up to you. But yeah, those are my top picks there. I recommend the Dell Optiplexes. I think they're workhorses. They'll last the test of time, and yeah, I think they do a fantastic job. But yeah, just make sure that it is an ultra small form factor as well, so that this is an i3, probably, yeah, it may be good enough, but yeah, it depends on what you want and how much you're willing to spend. It doesn't matter about what SSD is going to come with it. It's going to be used, and I would rip that out, and I'll show you how to rip it out, and they're very easy to do that, and then put the new SSD in. So going back to number 2 on our list here, we need a 2 terabyte SSD. The way that I get this is from AU PC Part Picker, this website here. If we just go down to storage, and we go to capacity, we want at least 2 terabytes. So I'm just going to pull that up here. I'm going to bring this one down like so. And we get a nice filter of all of the SSDs. Now, as I mentioned, the form factor M2 for this one, if your motherboard supports it, you can put that one in, and this one will come in at $289. It's a very good one. Like Samsung 890, 990 Pros, they're very, very good and reliable. And you can also filter this by price. Typically what I do though is I'll go with the 2.5 inch drives, and so that'll filter that out, and then I'll go by price here as well. I wouldn't probably, look, the other thing is you probably want an SSD as well, so you don't want a hard disk, you want a solid state drive. And so here you're left with these options. I wouldn't get this one with 1.92 terabytes. I'd probably get this 210 for $130. Or even the Crucial BX500, they're known to be pretty good for $159. And so you can see where to purchase those from. Centercom has this with free shipping, $159. You can hit buy and off you go. So it depends, again, how much you want to spend. The more, I guess, dearer they are, it can get pretty pricey. But yeah, somewhere in the sweet spot there was pretty good for me. So yeah, it's up to you how you want to sort of play this. Now, the next thing, look, in terms of Ethernet cables, you can buy on eBay, keyboard and mouse. Hopefully you have one, a monitor, you'll have one, and a flash drive, like just a small USB thumb drive to flash Ubuntu on. And I'll take you through that as well. But in terms of hardware, this is probably it. Now it's time to sort of assemble that hardware and get the USB drive flashed as well. So let's move on to that. Okay, so now I'm going to prepare the USB drive. I'm heading over to ubuntu.com to get the ISO file. So I'll just go to Get Ubuntu, click on the Server tab, and then Get Ubuntu Server. And then we'll download 24.04.1 LTS, 2.6 gigabytes. We'll click on that and it'll get downloaded. I've already downloaded it, so I don't need that again. The next thing that you want to download and install is a software called Balena Etcher, which very, very simply, you select that image that we've just downloaded, the ISO file, you select the USB drive, and you hit flash. I'm not going to be using this particular software, but I'll be using one that's already built into my operating system called Popsicle. It's the same scenario. Basically, you choose the image. So I'll go to my download section, and it's this Ubuntu 24.04.1 live server. Hit open, and then click next, and then choose that USB. I've got a 16 gigabyte USB little thumb drive, and I'll click on that one, and I'll put in my password, and it's now being flashed. So that's basically all you need to do. With this, so you can see, yeah, I've followed that same thing. It'll happen in Etcher as well. So utilize that. It's available in Linux, Mac, or Windows. And you'll just want to wait until this finishes. Okay, so flashing is now complete. The USB drive that I've just plugged into my computer has now been flashed with Ubuntu 24.04. Fantastic. So now it comes time to assemble the equipment. I've got my Dell Optiplex 7050 in ultra small form factor. And I've also got my 2 terabyte SSD that I'm going to use. So to install this, I'm just going to unscrew the back. You don't really need a screwdriver if it's not too tight. And all you need to do is just slide this out like that and open up the internal. So from here you can see this blue caddy will have the SSD. So what I'm going to do is just hold these two prongs and pull out and open this up, and you'll also see on the back of this 4 little slots for the SSD to go into. And so all you need to do is just with this bar here, push this against the back of that unit here and plug it in as these go in. Okay, so now that's safe and secure. Now, if you've got an M2 slot, or an M2 SSD, you can plug that in like in there, and that will just sit in, and then you'll have to screwdriver that down. There's a little screw here, and you can unscrew that and put that on top. So that is how that would be secured. But I'm not using a M2 drive. I'm using a SATA, 2.5-inch SATA. So what I'm going to do is then just plop that back in and then slide that into place and click it in. And that's all there is to this. And then I'm just going to close this off. No screwdrivers required, which is pretty good. And that's why I like the Dell Optiplexes. And then I'm just going to close that case off and screw in the back. That's ready to go. The next thing is to just plug in your, you'll need to plug in the monitor. You'll need to plug in a keyboard and mouse, the USB stick, an Ethernet cable, and the power supply. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the Ethernet cable plugged in. I've got that USB flash drive for Ubuntu. I've got the keyboard, the mouse, the HDMI, and the power supply plugged in, all ready to go. Okay, and that's how it should look. And we will then hit the on button, and I'll take you to the screen. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing, head on over to ministryofnodes.com.au and click on the support button. If you'd like to have one-on-one consulting, click on the consulting button and book a session on the calendar widget. And if you'd like to purchase a Bitcoin node, head on over to the shop and purchase one from shop.ministryofnodes.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.